Hey guys, just a quick note before we begin that the show may contain spoilers and adult language, but that's just because we know how to have a good time. Stick around, you'll be glad you did.
You are here for me to enlighten you.
You ever act like this again, you're barred for life.
It's just vile and base.
It's kind of embarrassing.
If you know your lines, then you can forget them.
Oh, I get it. It's very clever.
Hello peoples and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the podcast where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me today, as always, is the man who once stole a military helicopter from a San Diego naval base, Mr. Ryan Siebold.
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
Not bad, not bad. Man, dude, that was some sort of jaunt, dude. That was all across the news and everything, man. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, it was just sitting there. Keys were in it, and well, helicopters have keys? Do they have keys? I don't know. Who knows?
What were you even doing at a military base, dude? Were you part of that whole like storm area 51 or 52 or what the hell is it?
No. So in the off season, I did form an A team, and we were looking for some military surplus equipment to
scavenging, if you will.
Right. I mean, don't we all love it when a plan comes together? I know I do. So I formed an A team. If you would like to join, you're more than welcome. You can
No.
That's
that ship has sailed, actually, because I actually found out that, so I did a little bit of research. I found two members from your team that you put together actually managed to use government surveillance tracking technology to hunt them down and bring them on the show right now.
God damn it.
So if you will, please welcome to the show, Mr. Kraig Rasmussen and Seamus Smith.
Thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate you totally wrecking my witness protection program plan, but I'm happy to be here.
Oh, right. Damn it. I wasn't supposed to say that. Mr. John Smith and John Smith Jr.
Can I be John Johnson?
John Johnson.
Absolutely. Was that the, oh, no, I was thinking of Jeremiah Johnson, the infamous Robert Redford gif that we all know.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? He can still give us a knowing glance that lasts far too long. It's okay.
Everyone wants that
glance,
beard
man.
he has in that movie.
Go ahead, Seamus.
Are you all feeling the glare through the airwaves? That's how intense it is. Everyone right now is like, oh shit, I was shaking to my core and I don't even know why.
Not just
That's
intense.
Seamus Smith vibes coming at you.
Not just intense, but meaningful.
Deeply meaningful at that.
Yeah.
You sons of bitches, why'd you turn your back on my A team? I thought we had a thing going on. We were helping people for money.
Oh shit, did you guys like abandon him?
The private sector pays more.
Son of a
Yeah,
bitch.
I can't.
I got to work on my
argue
benefits
with
package.
That. Yeah, well, look, we paid off our cars, we paid off our houses.
I know, but I had a sweet black van. I don't know what else you need.
Well, do you provide the same sort of like insurance that Blackwater does? Because that was kind of the deciding factor for me to,
Oh shit. So what I'm hearing is that these guys are in demand and you lowballed them, dude. And that you kind of, had it coming to a degree.
I have a very specific set of skills, and I expect to be paid for them.
Point taken.
Also,
real quick, to let our listeners know, so these two dudes are awesome. They are actually from a program that we really enjoy called the Repeat Viewing Podcast. We were on their program recently, well, it was a few months ago at this point, to do Army of the Dead. That was super fun. The film that we are going to do today is going to be a decidedly different vibe than that one.
you mean in the sense that it's happy-go-lucky, crowd-pleasing, family-friendly comedy, right?
100%,
Right.
yeah.
It's
So
good,
sort of
'cause
akin to
I
like.
really wanted to watch something lighthearted this weekend, so I appreciate.
Well, yeah,
this
no.
very
Then
much.
you got a perfect film, man. Yeah, I mean, I think this
Nailed
is right
it.
there in that sort of mid '90s romantic comedy vibe, right? Just sort of everything's easy breezy, beautiful,
It didn't need any Hugh Grant in it, but it felt like it had all of the Hugh Grant. That's what I felt like.
Something about Fireflies.
Yeah.
Ryan, why don't you go ahead and tell us what we're watching and discussing today?
This is Grave of the Fireflies from 1988, described on Amazon as on the final days of World War II, 14-year-old Seita and his 4-year-old sister Setsuko are orphaned after their mother is killed during an air raid by American forces in Kobe, Japan. After having a fallout with their aunt, they move into an abandoned bomb shelter with no surviving relatives and their emergency funds and rations depleted. Seita and Setsuko must struggle to survive their hardships as well as those of their country, which is on the losing end of the war. Spoiler alert, they lost. I don't know how much...
What?
Yeah, damn it, right at the beginning of the episode. Jesus.
So,
right at the top, spoiler alert.
So this is my pick. One of the things I chose, I had wanted to see this for a long time. This is on a lot of 100 films you need to see before you die, specifically if you're dying in war, I guess.
Or 100 films that you need to watch that will make you want to die when you get done with them.
Right. Oh, yeah. I feel terrible. Like, I feel like I asked you all to a funeral to come hang out for some beers. Like, hey, guys, come join us, for this sadness.
It's fine. I mean,
to go revel
I could barely wake up from slitting my wrists last night at the end of this movie, but it's okay. I made it. I'm here. Let's talk about it.
Well, and the thing is, but also, like, you guys have done traditionally, like, a little bit more serious analysis, too, right? Like, you guys aren't just, like, 100% jokes all the time,
No,
right?
we know. I mean, in fact, I apologize for being so jokey. It's just that this particular movie probably is going to require some levity at
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, no, we typically try to be serious about the actual discussion of the film. It's just that, as you do a podcast over time, you realize that it has to be fun, every time out for you and especially for the listener. So more and more, I think we are maybe leaning not necessarily only in the direction of humor, but just finding as many ways as possible to make the show fun.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that Ryan and I definitely inhabited from the onset, which is that, like, we love film discussion, but every time you listen to someone's program, it's this, like, heavy NPR vibes, right? And everyone's like, welcome to Coffee Talk, let's discuss blah, blah, blah. It's like, why do we love to talk like that? Like, we're just like, dude, that was a dope movie, blah, 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 this and that, right? Like, that's how we discuss movies, so why can't we just do that on a program? And, yeah, and I think it's awesome, and like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, like, Mustachioed Podcastio, but he very much has a similar vibe. You guys should check him out. He's dope. We're going to bring him on the show next month, I believe it looks like. So, so there's, kind of a lot of us, like, taking this approach, and we just, I don't know, it's a lot of fun for me, and hopefully it's fun for the listeners.
Yeah, they're going to let you know. Anyway, go ahead.
Definitely. So this, generally speaking, we would have a trailer for you guys right now for the listeners. And because we're not going to assume that most of you speak Japanese, and we certainly do not, we're not going to be playing the trailer because there was no English language trailers that we could find, nor were there any English language clips that we could find. So once again, this is going to be a clip and trailer free episode. Normally you'd be stuck with just Jason and Ryan, but thankfully we got these two dudes helping us out, Kraig and Seamus, so be able to carry the load a little bit. You're not just stuck with the two of us.
Well, and luckily our English language reenactments of certain scenes are going to really pay off,
Speaking of which, let's chime in real quick. Did you guys all watch the traditional Japanese version or the English dubbed?
Subtitled Japanese version.
You did?
Subtitled,
okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, subtitled here.
So I thought I was signing up for that on Vudu, and I got the English dubbed, and I couldn't figure out how to get out of it. So it is.
Yeah, that's cool.
They only have that version on Vudu, from what I could tell. So.
Got it. Where'd you guys watch it? YouTube?
YouTube for free. So I hope your $4 went to some good cause.
I would not. Ideally, I would not recommend watching on YouTube just because of the constant chapter change. You'll see the dude's little arrow pop up, and it's just okay, this is
especially with a film like this that really kind of is trying to keep you in the moment and strike these emotional vibes, and then just seeing the little hand from the dude trying to skip chapters or whatever.
Really,
but it wasn't that egregious. But every 15 minutes maybe. So
I kind of like the little.
If I had to do it again, I wouldn't.
I like the little mini intermissions. It kind of helped my emotional state getting through this movie.
Take a break from the heaviness. So
time to grab some Kleenex.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and let's start off with the opening shot as we've been doing recently. So
at the beginning,
right? So our opening shot of Grave of the Fireflies. So there's a young man and he's staring almost directly into camera. His eyes are obscured in shadow by the brim of his hat, while his body's bathed in orange light, contrasted by dark, unseeable background around him. Now, as he looks upon his surroundings with an indifferent, unknowable expression, narration kicks in. It states that the day is September 21st, 1945, the day that he died. And that's going to set up what is a very sort of somber film that we're going to see over the course of these, the 90 minutes of the film. From there, we immediately see another young man. He's sitting up against a wall, and he appears to be starving. He's not in good shape. As a matter of fact, there's a number of other young men who are equally ravaged, bodies all around. The cops that are patrolling, they sort of inspect them, basically announce that all of them appear to be dead, at which point a cop grabs this empty can of candy that was in one of the dead bodies, throws it into a field, and the Fireflies all sort of, gather, light up around it, and then we see that same orange-bathed figure, the young man, show up with a young girl as well, and the two of them pick up the can. It sort of renews itself, becomes new. The two of them walk off, and then we get the credit sequence. So again, this is for our program where we've done 5 in a row, horror sci-fi genre films. This was very much going to be a hard ride into some really emotional territory. So if you're listening and it sounds like, oh wow, that's really heavy, good. It should. Your emotional compass is well tuned. So Ryan, especially because we've had so many, we've looked at all these, like I said, genre films, The Void and all of this. What did you think about watching this film, with the tone, and how did you respond? Obviously, was it too much for you? Did you think it was over the top? Was it a nice balance? Was it effective? What was your sort of high level reaction to the emotional nature and heaviness of the film?
A couple things. I'll start it off with a cinematic confession. Which we haven't done yet this season, so this will be our first season 2 cinematic confession. This is my first
6 episodes in till we get our first cinematic confession.
Hey,
Ryan, can you say that again? Just we'll slow it down a little bit more.
Cinematic confession into both mics. I'm talking into 2 mics.
It's weird. I'm really.
By the way, if
very
at any
closely
point,
now.
Seamus and Kraig, if at any point during the episode you have something you want to reveal, like some sort of secret shame, where you want to let the listeners know and just put it out and own it into the world, you just preface it by saying "cinematic confession" in a breathy voice, and then you say it. So that's out there for
me,
you.
My cinematic confession is that this is my first Studio Ghibli film.
What?
I've never seen
I'm sorry,
Studio Ghibli.
you guys have to go. This is just. I thought this was a good crowd to do a podcast.
No, that's the appropriate
with,
response,
but,
I think. Yeah.
That's kind of interesting, Ryan, because I actually might have my own cinematic confession.
Oh, here it
Yeah,
comes.
this is my first too. This is my first Ghibli film,
Get the
100%.
fuck out of this podcast. Both of
Yeah, I know it's weird, right?
you. Ryan's camera just collapsed from
Yeah.
shame.
Even the camera was like, "Oh fuck this, I'm out of here." You guys call yourselves cinephiles?
I can't even look at this
nah,
guy
bro.
anymore.
Nah, let's fight.
Oh man, I have too many
Yeah.
pieces of technology in front of me. I just collapsing
Well, and I think that from what I understand too, most of them are a little lighter than this one. Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, a
I
lot.
hope so. Yeah.
A lot. I'm going to say a lot. I'm just going to put this on Front Street. A lot fucking lighter than this one.
Okay.
I haven't. I mean, I've seen some Studio Ghibli over the years. I mean, I'm not versed as deeply as a lot of people are, but this was definitely the first time I finally got around to watching this movie, which is a title that I knew of for a long time because it was so acclaimed in '88. But yeah, I mean, decades it took to actually watch this movie.
Yeah, I mean, this has been on my list for a while too. And that's what I love about this podcast and others like it, is that it gives me an excuse to dive into these things that are just, I haven't gotten around to for whatever reason. And it's one of those movies, again, I think we talked about this with Under the Skin as well. This is one you have to watch by yourself. It's not like, hey, let's pop some popcorn and round up the kids and come sit around and watch kids die, and people.
Really? I invited all the neighborhood
horrors of
kids over
war
for this one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, show them what happens. This is what happens, kids, when you don't listen to me. So, yeah, this is my first studio. Is it Ghibli or Ghibli? Is it?
I believe it's Ghibli, but who the hell knows, man? It's,
Yeah.
first of all, it doesn't even seem like it's a Japanese word, so it's very hard to have a rubric.
Well, no, I think it's like Ghibli, right? The I's have that E pronunciation.
Oh, okay.
Except
Right, like
GH,
we?
but
Ghibli?
GH. That's why it makes it.
Ghibli?
Curious.
You know what? It's
Is it
going to be something totally off. It's going to be like, it makes an S sound in the native language.
I love that
It's like
10 minutes
sleepy
of
or
this
something.
episode are going to be devoted to the pronunciation of the name of the studio.
It's like
Oh,
GIF
dude,
or
you wouldn't be
GIF.
surprised how much of this program we dedicate to mispronouncing foreign films and
we haven't
languages
even
and names.
we haven't even gotten to Miyazaki yet. Is that how you say it? So
Yeah.
Miyazaki, right? I'm pretty sure it's Miyazaki. 100%.
I think
Final
it's
answer. Lock it down.
Miyazaki.
Miyazaki.
Myers' his first name, I think.
Speaking of which, this was directed by Isao Takahata,
Yeah.
who is the co-founder of
Nice.
GP,
Ryan, we
Ghibli.
actually, I think we strayed for 3 minutes and you still haven't actually answered the question of how the film's tone worked for you.
Oh, it's good.
That's the hard-hitting analysis you come to on this program.
Episode over, I guess. I thought I had.
All right, guys,
thanks
it was
for
good.
joining
See you
us.
later. Thanks so much for joining us on Esoterica Cinema.
We all did a
no,
great job.
Oh, thank God I can still make it to church.
Pats on the back. Beers for everyone. Beers for everyone.
Yeah. No, I was honestly, I was captivated by this film. I'm glad we watched it. I was just a little embarrassed that we invited you guys on board for this one and not something a little more fun, but it sounds like you were down for the ride, and this is kind of in your wheelhouse anyway. So,
yeah, well, no, I had actually proposed it to them, and they were saying that they had like wanted to do more Japanese animation and stuff like that. So, I mean, yeah,
dude,
like I
so
said, it's not everybody has to be a jokey asshole to come on the program, dude.
The score is fantastic. The matte paintings in the background are stellar. I guess they did some revolutionary stuff with the brown outlining versus normal standard black outlining, which reduced some of the contrast and just the we're going to get into all this, but you asked the patience and the timing of the film, how it lets you sit in these moments is just wonderful. And yeah, it was powerful. And I think I texted you several times throughout about the emotional impacts and to prepare yourself because for the saddening.
Yeah. The saddening.
Yeah.
I mean, the real truth of the real truth of not watching this movie until this point in one's life is because you really need all that time to emotionally brace yourself for this movie.
Right.
It ain't no
20
Ponyo.
No, it's definitely not a. It's not a Ponyo. You know, it makes Princess Mononoke look like a fucking Adam Sandler comedy. It's just
well, I think my neighbor Totoro really did get fat from eating a bunch of kids. If I'm not mistaken, that big cat thing. So
oh yeah, that's what it was. By the way, on that note, I was going to bring this up later, but did you guys happen to read at all about how when this film first came out, they actually packaged it as a 2-piece with My Neighbor Totoro?
But what I found most interesting about that was that it wasn't even in terms of presentation. It was in order to greenlight the budget for the movies. They had to basically say, look, we got this really kid-friendly one, and we got this heavy fucked up drama. So we know you don't want to finance the drama, but what about this kiddie movie? You know, so they basically positioned them to be double features from the very outset, and then they played them as double features, which one has to wonder about that. And then Jason, do you want to give the actual coup de grace of how the double feature
please,
went
by all
down?
means.
So basically they put this after My Neighbor Totoro every time on a double feature, and half the audience would walk out every time because they were like, no, we're good. We're in a great mood. Let's just go get some ice cream with the kids, you know. So yeah, I think that it's a very interesting genesis, I think, for this particular project. 'Cause even just watching it isolated from knowing that information, I was kind of like, man, how did this movie get made?
Yeah,
you know,
right? Definitely.
Well, something we haven't even mentioned yet is this is loosely based on a true story. And as a means of the Seita characters trying to deal with grief, leaving his younger sister to die of malnutrition. So the deeper you dive into this film, just the darker it gets and the more shit layers of an onion you have to deal with. It's like, oh my gosh.
Definitely.
After this, I do have some digital therapy sessions scheduled. I'm going to go ahead and log on. So if I have to sign up.
Afternoon on what's it called? BetterHelp or something.
Yeah, right. Mental health awareness month is coming around the corner, and I'm going to kick it off with some Grave of the Fireflies too.
Perfect movie to start that right off. Oh my God.
This movie seems like you got your head on the chopping block waiting for the guillotine to drop. Just like the whole time I was just like, something bad's going to happen to that little girl. You know, and it's just like waiting it out was super painful, you know?
Definitely. Yeah. Seamus, I want to get your opinion on something here, actually. So it's actually the beginning of the film, it actually starts off, like I said, with this sort of, young man who's bathed in orange. I believe it's safe to say that by the end of it that it's obviously it's the main character Saita and his daughter Setsuko, right? So,
sister.
Sister Setsuko. Excuse me. What did you think about just like using that as a device to start the film off, and then the way that it sort of comes back in the end? Because I thought it was really interesting to just introduce the main character sort of like as this ghostly figure, then sort of show his real body, and you're not exactly sure what's going on there. It sort of takes you a little bit. What did you think that as a narrative device?
I mean, I liked it. I mean, it does set the table for the I guess the tone you should brace yourself for. Any movie that opens with like, this is the day that I died, and then it's just like, okay, this is not going to be, a fun little ride. And I think I did really like the non-linear nature of the structure of the movie in general. I thought it was pretty well done. But yeah, I mean, any movie that opens with like the narrator being like, okay, I'm going to tell you how it ends, which is my death. But let me, before I get to my death, let me tell you about some other fucked up shit that, you know, my sister and I had to persevere through for the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting to sort of, you know, go back, and I didn't it took me a little minute to understand that like that was actually like the main character speaking, like, you know, it wasn't exactly sure until
I mean,
you know, the obvious physical resemblance kind of helps bring that along.
At the very beginning of the movie because he's completely malnourished and about to die, which is really subtle in animation. You don't get the same thing. It's not Into the Wilderness when you watch Emil Hirsch just waste away on camera. Like it's harder to tell the little girl is malnourished as the movie goes on until they really hit it home, you know. But I think that's a nice subtle thing that exists in the animation of this movie, is that it is there, you know. Like she has a big fat kind of round face at the beginning of the story, and it slowly thins out. And I didn't even realize it until like beginning of the third act or so, how much they were changing the appearances of the characters, which you don't see that often in animation, because I think it's safer to be able to recognize the characters, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So when the movie sort of kicks off in earnest after that initial credits sequence, we are introduced to our main characters, Saita and Setsuko, and it jumps back probably 1, possibly 2 months. And, you know, pretty immediately we experience an air raid, and this is going to be kind of a recurring theme. That was something that I thought was handled really well in terms of just sort of making you feel the anxiety of never really knowing when those are going to hit. So, you know, the air raid goes off, the family needs to leave for the bomb shelter, and, you know, the little girl Setsuko, she's upset, she doesn't want to go. Obviously, you know, the brother's like, hey, don't worry about this. He straps her to her back, they leave, we see the bombs being dropped, the entire town sort of fleeing away, and then we get that really effective shot where, you know, it's all of the sort of cities on fire. We get the sort of wide shot of it blazing with all the people sort of cowering in that like lower third horizon, and then in that middle horizon we get the soldier, you know, and he walks by and he's chanting like "Hail to the Emperor" as like the people cower and the buildings ablaze, you know. And there's some obviously very powerful commentary behind that, with the sort of you know, nature of war and exactly, you know, costs, whether they're hidden or right there on the surface. Kraig, this is something I actually wanted to ask you, because a lot of people, and I would sort of put myself in this camp, would describe this film as like an anti-war film, you know, but the creator's actually sort of gone on record saying it wasn't necessarily his intent, though certainly his belief structure kind of backs that up. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think it is or it isn't? And you know, why do you think the creator maintains that it isn't?
I found that quote from him very interesting, because I would say that this seems like an anti-war film, or at least it's a film that really tries to show what the true cost, like the local cost of war actually is, you know, and having that soldier, you say "Long live the Emperor" while he's about to, you know, either commit harakiri seppuku or, you know, just die by fire or whatever. You know, he's taking that death with honor and taking it as kind of a nod to the greatness of the Empire of Japan or whatever. And like that, as a very, you know, especially I'd say in our strangely nationalistic times, has a ring of terror to it. You know, it's got something that's very complicated within it. And I think that this movie is a lot about those complications, but from a very kind of local, personal perspective, you know. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say that it is not anti-war. I don't know if I can completely agree with it, because it pretty much is just showing that the cost of war is too high on the people of the world, or on the people of each individual country. But I don't know. At the same time, I actually kind of thought maybe, and it's had some criticism for this, that it sort of makes Japan not look like necessarily the aggressor that they were, because it doesn't talk at all about what Japan was up to. You know, it just specifically talks about, you know, what's happening at home. But I think that it's tough because World War II is such a vicious thing, and it's dangerous to whitewash any of those details. But a lot of the details, especially about Japan and China, get absolutely whitewashed.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I had a hard time with it. It was somewhat nationalistic in that sense, maybe. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but I think that's also pretty common, especially, you know, when you sort of talk about pre-internet times, that's kind of one of the things that I think gets lost a lot of times is the flow of information that we have today in 21 is so far beyond what we had like pre-internet, especially in the 80s and the 90s even. And there's so much that we've learned in the last 20 years, through just, again, this sort of global information network that's out there now. And, we're realizing that a lot of our histories are a lot more complicated and ugly than we ever might have thought. But I think at the same time, you as an individual can really only speak to your experience. And perhaps when he says it's not an anti-war film, what he means to say is that it's not a commentary on war at all. Like, it's definitely not pro-war, right? Like, it's not one of those things like, by saying it's not anti-war, I'm not saying it's pro-war, but what I'm saying, this being the creator, could be that, it's a story about these two people. It's a story about these specific characters in the context of a larger war. And it's not about blame, and it's not about who's the aggressor. It's about them being victims caught in this scenario that's much larger than themselves.
Yeah, true. I think that, it's not about good guys and bad guys and, heroes and villains. And I love war movies that do this. Paths of Glory kind of did this.
I love that. It's actually that movie and Empire of the Sun kept coming up in my mind a lot while I was watching this.
Right. Nice. It's about the people caught in between.
It's about Paths of Glory, Hope and Glory.
Oh, okay. I was thinking Paths of... We talked about Kubrick's...
Yeah, we did Paths of Glory last
sorry.
season,
Yeah, I thought you were talking about the same movie I was. There's a John Borman movie.
Yeah, no, Hope and
Glory,
Paths
which
of
is
Glory
about
Kubrick.
John Borman of Zardoz fame? Is that John Borman?
That's the one, yeah.
And Excalibur?
Ryan, don't you fucking talk shit about Zardoz, you son of a bitch.
Oh, no, dude. We have issues with Zardoz.
Hey, I got an hour and a half of it. I'm locked and loaded, ready to go.
All right,
yeah,
We've already done that episode.
It's not horrible, but man, I'm not even going to say that's a good movie.
Right now.
No.
But anyways, we digress.
Yeah, we do digress.
I do. Oh, sorry.
Well, I just want to say that Hope and Glory, if a listener hasn't seen it, is an excellent film that's very similar in the sense that it's about innocence lost during wartime. And the attempt of those characters to try and retain as much innocence and live their childlike experience as much as possible within this war-torn city. So I kept thinking about that movie a lot. And sorry to step on Paths of Glory. That has a
sounds
similar...
like yours is a better comparison.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, that and Empire of the Sun were really on my mind as I was watching this.
I have seen Empire of the Sun. I have not seen Hope and Glory.
The one thing, and this goes back to what we're saying about whether or not this is a war film, a anti-war or pro-war film, is that I think it's much more about the uncontrollable circumstances that one faces within a wartime. So it isn't about good guys and bad guys at all. It's just about the circumstances, and that's why Seta goes to the extent that he goes to try and keep his sister alive.
Well, I'd even zoom out a little bit further and say that it's just getting caught in the crossfire of powerful men. For sure. In the sense of, poverty, homelessness. I mean, you could look at and transpose these themes on top of a lot of social things we deal with that have nothing to do with you or me or anything. It's just we're caught in the crossfire of these powerful, entities that are going at it. It's happening today. I thought a lot of even, war-torn countries like Syria or Yemen, places that are just, unfortunately, in the, these civilians are in the wrong place at the wrong time, in these power, hungry struggles that are going on for various reasons. And you could say, well, this is the right thing or that's the right thing, but it's not, when you go down to the microcosm of a brother and a sister dealing with it in the trenches, and the rubble and dead parents and all of it, and then eventually dying themselves. Good guys and bad guys doesn't apply to that anymore. It's just about survival and what we, and then that stripping all that away, it then allows you to kind of put yourself in their shoes more or less, and kind of, at least with me, I was like, what would you do kind of thing? Because it's not about, oh, well, this is good and this is bad. It's about, where you would take some of those things and maybe overlay them on your opinions, because of your belief system or your nationality or whatever. This isn't about that. Oh, well, Japan is bad, or, they were the bad guy because they were the axis of evil or all of that. This is about a brother and a sister and what they did in these moments. And, so often we see these moments kind of exploited with heroism, and they have to be heroes, and this was just about kids being kids and trying to stay alive, and really kind of humanized it a lot.
I thought this movie was most successful as like not being a war movie first and foremost, but more of an intimate portrait of the collateral damage of war itself. You know, through these two brothers and sisters. I mean, it's such a tight knit view of the cause and effect of war on people who are not fighting in the war; they're just in the crosshairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I kept thinking of the Marine song From the Sands of Iwo Jima, and I was like, wow, this is a very different take on World War II than that kind of vibe, you know? Like, I just kept thinking about that, like, Jesus Christ, like all the fighting that went on just nearby, locally to where these kids were experiencing all this, you know, really not that far away on the islands out there, you know?
Definitely. So, to get back to the film, very quickly, the Saita and Setsuko characters get separated from their mom. They learn that everyone's being sent to the local elementary school for care. That's where the Saita character actually learns that his mom is initially in super bad shape. She's gravely wounded. Her body's entirely bandaged and bloodied. She goes on to pass away from there very quickly. We see them taking her out in a stretcher, just sort of covered in all of these different insects.
Maggots.
And
maggots, that was a nice touch. The maggots
pretty...
grow, before she was even completely gone. The use of flies also in this movie.
Yeah.
There was a really subtle visual cues that they use throughout the movie that just kind of like lays that undertone of the decay and death that they're dealing with on a daily basis as an island at war.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah. I think there's that one sort of shot towards the end when Sensuko's kind of towards the end and then the fly lands on her face and sort of walks around. And
she doesn't
react, they do sort of use that, I guess, to, illustrate just the decrepit and brutal nature that these guys are in. So, but they also do something else that's really interesting is that I noticed there would be a lot of like these sort of juxtapositions especially with regards to like the color palette and the tonality. And so one of the examples is that pretty much immediately the shot after the mom being taken out on the stretcher, again with the graphic insects and maggots and whatnot, it's like there's this sort of scene of Saito walking and the sky's really brightly blue and he comes across this like water that's sort of gushing from a pipe, and instead of being polluted or anything like that, it's drawn like really fresh and colorful, it like sort of feels refreshing as you're watching it. And they would sort of contrast a lot of that in these sort of day after ways, where there'd be these horrible air raids, and the air raids are always, represented with these browns and muddied color palettes. Ryan, to your point earlier, using the brown outlines instead of the traditional black. And then the next day it'd just be like bright and vivid. And I thought that was really interesting the way that they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the most interesting juxtaposition that came across to me was the fireflies and the fire bombing. Like there's something so beautiful in nature and something man-made that is so destructive and just kills at mass. But like the fact that they almost had the same effect in the sky. Like was it fire bombs from planes, or was it like insects flying around making the world more beautiful?
Yeah, well, I think it's a triple entendre, right? The Fireflies title. The kids are the Fireflies because their light only lasts for so long. The bombs are the Fireflies because they actually look like fireflies, and then, of course, the Fireflies themselves. So, yeah, I think that there's some really strong visual elements of this movie. I really like the nether world, or like, wherever he's speaking from, where they're still healthy and still wearing the same clothes as the first day they left home, that has this, kind of sepia tone the entire time. So they easily can fill the scene with both versions of Seita and Setsuko, and I really like a lot of those moments,
Yeah, and the color scheme too is they're using that same sort of orangish color as the Fireflies, to your point, Seamus. And yeah, I think that's to Seamus's point earlier, with the way that the bombs and the Fireflies are both visually represented in very much the same fashion, I'm sure is some sort of statement right now. Whether it's sort of that there's beauty and violence, whether it's sort of that both the night sky is populated by, you know, good and bad, but they're sort of, you know, represented from the same sort of place.
Maybe it's the good and bad are both fleeting, because like the light of the firefly only lasts for so long. I mean, they make a point of showing that the fireflies die off even after just one evening of being in the cave with them, right? So I think that the whole point they're trying to make on a philosophical level, I think, is that like even like this too shall pass, you know, like the bombs might be falling right now, but eventually their light will go out and a different time will come, and, you know, people will be healthy and happy again. And sort of in a way, there's a little bit of that return at the end of the film, you know, where they kind of say that life will restart just from the things that happen to characters towards the end, not the main characters, but everybody around them.
Yeah, no, that's a strong point. And actually, yeah, in that way, it did kind of remind me a little bit of, because I mean, I'm not somebody who's like, you know, well versed in a lot of these sort of deep metaphor films, right? Like I grew up on '90s films like Jurassic Park and Aliens. So
what is Eraser with Arnold Schwarzenegger? Guys? Let's talk about it right now.
Yeah, so I don't have like a deep well of, you know, these like really meaningful films to draw from, but just being a kid, it reminded me very much of like Charlotte's Web, right? In the respect of just like these things happen, and, you know, life and death are all part of a cycle, and, you know, for as horrible as some of these things may seem, you know, they're very necessary and they're part of life. Obviously, you know, represented in a more strong fashion when, you know, with human characters and all of that and actual, but it sort of hit that same place for me emotionally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think what I thought was really interesting was, I mean, this is very realistic, I guess not interesting, is that when the mom dies, Seitan never tells his sister. And he never finds out that his sister knows his mom is dead until his sister says, let's put the fireflies in a grave after that night in the cave. And
he actively goes out of his way to make sure she doesn't.
Exactly.
Actually.
He's like hiding the ashes and stuff for the whole movie. And then she says, Mama's in a grave. Let's put the fireflies in a grave just like Mama. And that's when it becomes real to him. And I thought that element was so realistic and so painful. And I just thought that was really beautifully handled, you know, because he didn't want to tell her. He didn't want to have to explain what death was. But she figured it out. I mean, maybe the aunt had I don't think that aunt had any like compassionate, long, deep conversations in any nice way with anybody, as far as I could tell, based on her character. But I think that, you know, somehow this little girl figured it out. And I thought that was a beautiful way to look at the cycle of life through this. Well, you say 4. I can't even believe she's only 4, you know. I guess she's in animation, it's hard to tell, but yeah. Definitely
precocious one, you know. Yeah. But... yeah, and I think that sort of introduces one of the concepts and themes of the film that I personally found really interesting, and you guys can feel free to chime in on this, which is that, like, it's just sort of the overall nature of childhood, right? Because in many ways, I think the film is showing that, you know, a child in war is sort of stripped of that traditional childhood experience while at the same time responding to it in ways that only children can, right? And I think that it's also commenting on the fact that, like, children are often smarter, more observant, etc., than we make them out to be. You know, even though, like, you can tell earlier on, there's a moment where Saita kind of sidesteps getting Setsuko to her mom, and she sort of gives a look where she just, like, doesn't really respond. And you can tell that, like, she knows that something's wrong, right? Like, she may not know that she's passed yet, and I think that's a theme that comes up many, many times, which is that, like, so often, you know, we go out of our way to try to, you know, shield children from some of the more horrifying realities of life, and especially in these wartime situations. But that they figure it out, you know, they know something's wrong. It's just this sort of intrinsic thing where even if they don't understand exactly the nature of the powers that be and what's going on, like sort of the way that like any animal knows if something's on fire, right? It's just that intrinsic animalistic sense of like, yes, something is definitely wrong here, right? But they still have that thing where they can take mortar shells and turn it into a game of tic-tac-toe or dolls, right? Like they still have that imagination at play to deal with these situations. And I think that's one of the most unique aspects of, you know, being specifically a child in wartime. And obviously I haven't, you know, very suburban, you know, life over here. I haven't had to go through any sort of trauma like that. I mean, I don't know what it's like. And that's why it's great to watch these movies and sort of get these reality checks and realize that, like, even though this is a cartoon, like, again, this is a semi-autobiographical tale, and people dealt with this. They went through exactly what is being represented here, and it's important for us to remember that this is part of the human experience, and very thankfully, it's not any part of the four of ours experiences, but we're very privileged in that respect, and this is something that happens to people. It's not just a fictional story,
Well, the one like a perfect moment of not knowing the complexity of what was actually happening, but a scene that really stood out to me is when they were gonna sell the kimonos that belonged to their mother, and she didn't yet know that she was dead. But the way she reacts and is like just grabbing onto the kimonos, and like, these are mama's, and like, like, don't take them away. You could even argue she sort of just by that point sensed like mom's not coming back.
Yeah, definitely.
But like, just, it was super emotional. Like, just something as simple as like, we're going to take these dresses. No, you're not, like, these belong to my mom.
And I think at that point too, because that's probably one of the last sort of things that remain, that's her possession too at the time. They're starting to trade all their stuff for food because nobody can get any food. And I think that was like the last sort of remaining physical token that she probably had of her mom, and that's where that came from.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, not only are we privileged to not live in war zones, but like, we don't live in the same time. I mean, in the early 20th century, even in America, people were often making their own preserves and, pickling their own stuff and, really responsible for the day-to-day, consumption of food on a different level than we will ever understand. Having grocery stores nearby and fast food and restaurants and all that, like, it just wasn't the same life in the early 20th century before all the modern conveniences. And that's one of the things that I really thought about throughout this movie was like, man, no plumbing, no fucking heat or cool air or, just refrigerated food or food of any kind. I mean, just the amount of scrounging that has to happen as the story goes on. You really have to wonder, as you said earlier, like, what would you do,
I mean, Kraig, in all fairness, I do live in Florida, so...
You're right. Sorry. Three of us are privileged enough to not have to... Sorry.
Right. After we're through here, I got to go, finish cleaning up the alligator that I'm having for dinner.
I was going to say, check the gator traps, but I guess you did that before we started recording.
No, we got some fresh gator now on deck.
Oh, there's that New Orleans accent. He doesn't want to bust it out when we do Hard Target on a guest show. We were guests on a show, and then he busts out this perfect New Orleans accent right now.
That's right.
Because, honestly...
Have you been working on it since then? Was it like traumatizing and you worked on it?
Nothing pissed me off more about podcasting. I wasn't able to stick the landing on the Cajun accent.
That's interesting because we also covered Hard Target at the very beginning of our podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, you did?
That's awesome.
Yeah, one of the first few episodes actually.
We briefly, I don't think we actually mentioned this in the episode, but Hard Target was sort of responsible for the love affair between our two podcasts because Jason and I started making Uncle Duvet jokes on Twitter, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Got it. So, might call it a duvet cover.
That's right.
Hey.
That's right.
Ryan's a puntastic
Speaking of eating things locally, I know this probably would have been off tone, but like, did anyone wonder like why they didn't at least try eating fireflies? I mean, like, because you're starving to death. Wouldn't you want any protein possible? Like,
that would have been a weird addition to the symbol element of the fireflies, though, because then you're like, well, what does it mean that the children are eating themselves? What?
Yeah, I think it's probably because if that was the case, then they don't have a movie. Because then she doesn't go malnourished, and it's like, oh, actually.
I also don't think the little girl would have been okay with that. Like, that was like one of the few comforts she had when they actually got to that shelter. So.
Yeah. Also, are we certain that that's like a source of protein, like 100%?
No, not at all. If you're like a survivalist, I'm sure you eat like whatever insects you can find. You do what you have to do. One thing that I actually raised a question at the very beginning of this movie, and maybe somebody can answer this for me. So when the first air raid's going off, and they're in the garden of the house, and they're like, "Oh no, Mom, you get to the shelter, like whatever." Like, it seemed weird to me that like they were more concerned with the mom getting to the shelter on time than the children. Like,
just him. The mom. Wait, yeah, where was the little girl?
She's like, you stay with your brother, listen to your brother. It's like, why? I mean, my question was like, wouldn't you have more?
Let's all go together.
Kids getting there.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, and it was very laissez-faire. Like they, the whole thing was just so nonchalant in the sense of like, okay, get there when you can. We're gonna go to the shelter, the air raids, and like the intensity of the film definitely built throughout as we started to see the repercussions of these things. But yeah, I agree with you. The opening sequence of the film, I didn't really, the way they set the tone initially in the subway, and then we go to this happy little place where the mom's just like, okay, get all your things, let's go to the shelter. And nobody really seemed very, the sense of urgency wasn't there in that scene.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Jason, you made the point that air raids were sort of this common thing throughout the movie. And I thought maybe they were already common. Like it was already common enough that the danger didn't seem so extreme. And actually, I mean, maybe history has something to do with this because I actually just read a little bit up on this. Maybe this is even IMDb, but essentially when Kobe, because this takes place in Kobe, when Kobe was firebombed, it was only firebombed once or twice, and everything else that was done around Kobe was to mine the bay and to bomb factories and airfields specifically. So the citizens were not bombed as often as like in Tokyo and other places. So it's possible that there was some, historical reason that the mother wasn't that concerned. Like it was local, but not right on the top of their heads as far as she knew. Because even when Seta later is caught in one, maybe it's the same one. It's like a slow motion reveal of how dangerous the fire actually will be. Like there's this long, 2-minute silent sequence more or less where he's just kind of standing in the street. He's like looking at little fires, and then suddenly a house erupts in an explosion, and it's like, then the tempo of the movie picks up.
Yeah, that's one of the more interesting things I think about kind of watching some of these older films is that I think there's a lot of times where, because they're product of their times, there's things that were taken for granted when it was made that everybody just sort of knew about, that maybe 60 years later we don't quite inherently know. Where, it wouldn't have made sense to explain it back then because it's like, so for example, like one of the things is there's sometimes where I'll watch like old war movies, right? And especially when they're in color, I feel like they don't kind of introduce what army is what color and stuff like that because you're just sort of supposed to know, right? And I think at the time it's like, okay, well, when you're in the middle of this war, they're like, oh yeah, these soldiers wore green, these soldiers wore blue, and it would sort of be like too on the nose to go in and explain that. That's sort of tangential to what I'm saying here, which is that, like, again, if it's sort of understood, like you're saying, that the moms, maybe it was just customary, the moms went out, the brothers took them. There could be some sort of historical context, and it's kind of difficult to know that sometimes.
Especially on a family structure level, too. There could be like some Japanese tradition of, the structure of the family, especially with the dad away at war. The son is responsible for the... I don't know, like the eldest son is responsible for the kids. I don't know. I mean, there could be all kinds of tradition. You're right. I mean, there could be some reason, but I didn't find that was like a distracting element of the story. Yeah.
Oh no, I just it did raise a question in parenting though. I was just like, you seem to be more concerned like, oh, I should get over there, and it lucked out for the kids obviously because what befalls their mom by getting to the shelter is like, well, she's just like pretty much burned alive.
Well, and who knows if she even made it? I mean, they don't even say. That's the thing is like. It's just a fulcrum to separate the characters,
Yeah, I believe that's kind of what's going on there. So, and then there was sort of reintroducing one of the themes that I had touched on earlier. There's a scene like halfway through where they sort of go to the beach, and again, this is one of those day afters where it's sort of presented in this very bright color palette. The water's very refreshing, etc. But they're sort of walking along the beach, and Setsuko finds a dead body and it's covered by like a sheet and like the feet are sticking out and she's like, oh, what's this? And he's like, nothing, come here, let's learn how to swim. And I thought that, so I think that if you kind of want to distill it down, the second act is largely about sort of, again, Saida's character trying to shield her from the horrors of war, and reposition things and just give her like whatever sort of semblance of a childhood she can, right? But then sort of her just, again, being smart enough to sort of intuitively know that there are things going on, but also being stronger as a child than we might give her and them credit for, right? Because I don't think it's that she's pretending necessarily that these things aren't happening. She's maybe too young to understand the severity of it, but it's just like, you know what? Yeah, these screwed up things are happening, but I can also still have these moments of being a kid and I can still play and I can still be in my imagination.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anything, Saita's the one who's pretending,
Exactly, 100%. Yeah. So again, I thought it was a sort of a salient point that the film made over the course of the second act to sort of just beat that in a little bit. So, and then we also get that very nice scene that sort of speaks to the lack of permanence, right, and just the fleeting nature that we talked about with the Fireflies, where there's the scene where they've set up house in this it's an old bomb shelter, right, that they sort of just have gone in and made their own, and they've sort of furnished. They set up this mosquito nest, and then while they're resting, they basically go out and collect a bunch of fireflies and bring them in, and it sort of lights up the whole thing and glows, and it's very pretty. And I thought it was interesting that while they're in there and they're sort of resting, that Saita actually sort of has a daydream about a military procession, about a naval procession, and I believe it was specifically about his father. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was his father's ship.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's sort of something that we haven't really talked about at all, which is that, and the film doesn't really focus on it a lot, but to your point that, to your point that you had brought up earlier, just about it's sort of, the position that it takes on looking at the war, I think it is a very sort of homespun, nationalistic, one-sided view of the war through this kid's eyes, right? Again, it's not interested in telling the balance, but it's he very much believes in, the cause of the Japanese nation and the strength of the military and all of that, as so many of those people did. And I think that's kind of the point of that sequence.
I agree with that, although, even though it is nationalistic, I do think there is no political motive specifically, which we did sort of talk about. So I found it kind of interesting that there is that element of remembering this naval parade that he witnessed, or whatever they call it. It's not a parade, I don't think. That's wrong. Maybe when it's in the water, it's not a parade. Anyway, but yeah, I found that to be kind of interesting, especially, and we did, I want to back up a little bit before the shelter, because there's an element that I want to talk about a lot.
Sure.
And it sort of ties in that, this element of nationalistic pride and duty to the country and stuff like that is sort of put in his
duty.
Yeah, I did say duty, and that's exactly how I meant it. Shit jokes really help this movie, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. Really grounding the humor here.
But no, the aunt really puts it in his face. His bitch aunt really just shoves the fact that he's 14 in his face, you're a man now, you should be fighting for the war effort one way or another, or working a job, or it's even though his school and his job and everything has been totally burned out and he's got no place to go, she kind of becomes selfish more and more each day, even though she, I presume, invited them to stay there. So I wanted to ask you guys, what did you guys think about that element of the story where it's the kids are handling it better than the adults in a way?
Yeah. I think that's kind of, one of those points again, which is sort of, in a way, it's sort of, I think it's the same sort of relationship a little bit that maybe Saita has with Setsuko, but with him going to the next generation, in terms of each generation up thinks they're doing a great job, because really, and even saying it out loud, maybe that's the whole point of the mother character initially, is that she's sort of doing the same thing to Saita that Saita's doing to Setsuko, where it's oh no, this war thing isn't really happening. Everything's fine, right? And that's where her sort of aloofness comes from, is it's really just her trying to, because, Saita may be 14 and his aunt might think that he's an adult, but that's also his aunt, right? And usually the aunt characters can, be strict, whether it's Cinderella or whatever, right? Aunts are either super sweet or they're super vindictive with no in between, right? So she could be that more, and then that's a contrast to the mother character that, again, is still just trying to give Saita whatever semblance of a teenage childhood that they can have, right? Maybe that's where that comes from. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I thought that was an interesting element. It's there was so little compassion in her, and they really made a point of showing that over and over before the kids eventually left to make their own way in the shelter, and there's I don't know, there's something very heartless about that I thought was really interesting to show, because I think it's about the desperation. It's not that she actually was perhaps heartless. I mean, maybe, who knows, even though she wasn't the sister of the mom, maybe they're just all shitty parents in that family, but it was a fascinating thing, because usually when you watch a war movie, again, it's about the heroism of it, and you almost never see people being shitty to each other who are on the same side of the fight.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
Well, I mean, as you run out of resources, though, I mean,
right.
you know, there's only so much to go around, and you got to all of a sudden now 2 more mouths to feed. Desperation kicks in, and you start to, you know, see what people are really made of, I think. And when you start to peel that back, I mean, you put any one of us in a situation like that. You know, give all 4 of us one microphone and watch us all fight over the attention we are starved for.
Isn't that what we're doing? Sorry.
Yeah, right. Okay, no, but I do think there's actually a really interesting point, and I do think that it's a much more pointed commentary, which I think is kind of what you're trying to bring up than we might realize, because so much I think of the point of what the filmmaker is trying to say is about the lack of compassion from everyone around. And I think specifically the lack of compassion that the adults are showing the children, right? And that could be a unique mindset to the filmmaker. That could be something that was sort of maybe looked back upon and realized after the fact as a nation, right? Doing soul searching. Like, I don't know enough about the situation to be able to say that. But yeah, when you look at the fact that, I mean, the main character starved to death because he was neglected, right? His sister, who was the main supporting character and arguably a main character, same thing happened to her. And then this point is actually further reinforced towards the end. So we're actually at the point now where, you know, Setsuko's revealed to be, you know, actually sick. Primarily, she's suffering from malnutrition, and that's being exacerbated by the fact that she has diarrhea, which was obviously, you know, a strong cause of death back then during the war efforts. So this is a very common situation that we would learn that people found themselves in at the time. And I think that the callousness of the people, and the funny thing is, I don't think that it's necessarily a metaphor for like the government. I think that he's being very... I think that the commentary is directed at the people, you know, people's lack of compassion for other people. And we see it expressed when he takes her to the doctor. And he's basically like, hey, you know, she's dying. What can I do? Like, blah, blah, blah. Is it this and that? And the doctor's like, get the hell out of here, kid. She's fine. She just needs some food. Next. Yeah, and he exactly. like erupts. And he's like, where the hell am I supposed to get food? We're all starving, right? And again, so it's just this repeated callousness and dismissiveness of the haves, if you will, around the have-nots. I think that's a large part of the commentary.
Fair. I mean, that's probably why the opening scene is what it is, because I was actually asking myself that exact question in that, you know, why is the opening scene all about people walking past these kids and not doing a goddamn thing to help any of them and just being like, well, another one's dead, you know, another one bites the dust. Like, it definitely was pointed, you know.
Following that scene at the doctor's where she's, you know, she's already heading towards death's door, it did raise a logical question, because I think at the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2, they're on the train and he's telling her, like, it's going to be all right. Mom has X amount of money in the bank. Right now, it seems like he doesn't go to get that money from the bank until he erupts and finds out Japan surrendered. And then he brings her like watermelon and food, and she dies with, you know, after one, you know, bite of watermelon. I'm like, well, if they established that the money was there, like, why did it take him so long to actually go get the money to buy the food? It was too late because, you know, she got one bite of a watermelon that died.
Circumstances changed somehow because, and they don't explain why, but money wasn't being accepted, because there's a whole scene with the farmer where he's like, I'll buy whatever you want to sell me, and the farmer's like, I can't sell you anything.
Yeah, it's more about resources than finances.
And it was about trade. They made the point that it was about bartering at that point. But then
you could have all the money in the world, but if there's no rice to buy because the farmer said,
well, you know, saying it out loud too right now, like I just recalled that there was a lot of talk earlier about all of the rations being reserved for the soldiers.
Right, there was that
so maybe
too.
Right now it's like basically, well, once they surrendered, now all of those resources are once again at people's disposal.
That would be logical. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you're right. They don't really go out of their way to really express that. Like you kind of got to work that through yourself after the fact.
Well, this movie doesn't spoon feed you. I mean, I like the fact that it is subtle. It's very, you know, it's very symbolic and metaphorical. But yeah, it doesn't like, let me over explain so you understand why this is important or this is tragic. You know, I like that about this movie.
If anything, it's the opposite. I mean, the nonlinear storytelling, a lot of it, I was like, when is this supposed to be? Like, they would bounce back and forth. And I'm like, when did this moment clearly happened, like in a time we didn't see. We glossed over it, and then they went back. And I found that to be really interesting. It's like, even beyond anything Tarantino would do, because Tarantino, you can follow why usually it's nonlinear, or at least follow that it is nonlinear and not be like, wait, this is earlier? Hold on a second, I'm kind of confused here. But I kind of like that they leave it up to you to do that, because I think it adds to the lyrical nature of the movie.
Or I mean, since the way it opens, I mean, like that whole idea of like you've seen your life flash before your eyes. It doesn't mean that it's going to be flashed linear to you, you know. Like,
Sure.
and if
Exactly.
the whole pretext is like this is, you know, I know when I die, then this is what led to it. I mean, I thought that was just it reinforced like just this genuine feeling that this movie has as a whole.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so, you know, pretty much at this point, we're kind of marching forward towards the end of the film. Like I said, Setsuko's pretty much, you know, she's unfortunately, she's not long for this world. And yeah, now that the resources have opened up, Saita is able to go get the watermelon. He brings it back to her. You know, we can tell right away that, you know, she has no energy, that she's not going to last. He's able to, you know, get her to at least have a little bit of the melon, which, you know, she sort of eats and says it's good and smiles. And we sort of understand that that's the last that we're going to see and hear of her. And it's interesting because, again, you know, we get this very juxtaposed visual, right? Where Setsuko's just died. I mean, this adorable 4-year-old girl, which, by the way, and I haven't even looked this up. I don't know if you guys did, but we haven't really talked about like the voice acting at all, and specifically of the little girl Setsuko. I don't know if any of you have any info on who that was, if it was really a young girl, if it was like a voice actor, because I mean, I adored that character and you know, you have to love that character for her death to mean as much as it does. And I think that that's achieved by exactly two aspects of production, which is the animation, which Kraig, you spoke to earlier, but also the voice acting, which we didn't.
I think so. And well, from what I understand here, I'm going to try to find this on IMDb. The little girl is one of the youngest voice actors ever in a Japanese movie, and she was so young and unable to speak clearly that they didn't give her very much to say. So all she did in the audition was introduce herself and say, "My name is Ayano Shirashi. I am 5 years old." That's all she said. And they were like, "You got the part." So
You are here to die.
yeah, exactly.
You killed my father. You're prepared to die.
Exactly. Then she killed everybody in the room. But she still got the part. Weird. So no, I mean, it's a very authentic thing. And actually, I read that the voice actor for the dubbed version is like a 69-year-old, you know, American woman, and it's kind of like, what the fuck?
I mean, that's pretty
like,
much the way that goes, right? It's either like straight like children like Peanuts, or like, you know, Nancy Cartwright, you know.
Well, or like Tara Strong, for instance. She does so many voices of young girls in so many different animated series, and she's like 50, you know. No offense.
Isn't
Tara.
she Miss Minutes on the Loki
She
series?
is Miss Minutes, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And to say she's 50 is not an insult. Anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah, I thought the voice acting was really strong, especially because you have to spend so much time with these two characters, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and I know, Ryan, we sort of talked off about how funny it was when and one of the things that it took us a minute to work through, but we're talking specifically about where after Setsuko passes the next day and he goes to basically get like the charcoal and, you know, to cremate the body, and just the casual nature that the charcoal salesman is just like, "Oh yeah, beautiful day out there. Well, you're gonna need some charcoal for the bodies. Here you go.
I have in my notes
here's
here.
all the bamboo."
Jesus fuck.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that
Yeah, no,
that's in my
Ryan
notes.
was like, "Dude, like, what's with this guy? Just like, oh yeah, here's how much you need for burning bodies." And,
Sure is a nice day. You know,
it does
it's like,
it does reinforce that
Great
callousness.
day for burning bodies.
You know, like it does reinforce the callousness that's shown
yeah,
throughout.
exactly.
You know, like
Well,
from the doctor
yeah.
to the, you know, to whoever. It's just like, oh, you know, it's still a sunny day, beautiful. Well, you know, you burn a child's body this way most efficiently, and it's just
exactly.
like, yeah, I mean, it does.
If you have any trouble, come back. I'll help you. I'll help you out with some advanced tips.
Yeah,
He just sounds like such an arsonist connoisseur too. It's like, you know, use some bamboo for the smell. I recommend it. He had all these like, you know, specific things, and it did. You know, obviously the commentary there was that it was so common that
exactly.
He had dealt with it so many times that it's like, oh no, you just do a little of this, you know, a little honey for a sore throat, little bamboo for a child burning, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
bit of this,
Yeah, and
little bit
again,
of
you know,
that.
and it really like just reinforced, you know, that whole message. And then It also has what I thought was the most emotionally powerful scene, which is when he's sort of, and look, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like so much of my like emotional response to scenes it's the music that really just sells it, right? Because like, dude, I mean, once they bring in that opera song towards the end, and then he's, looking back and seeing just these vignettes of Setsuko being a child, and just playing, and like that was what really got me. Like that brought me to tears. The one moment in the film.
Oh, me too.
I was like really affected.
Fucking like I have an element of somewhat recent loss, and it was a cat that was a female, so it's like a little girl kind of lost, in my mind. And so whenever I see something like that, I'm fucking crushed. But
of course,
I think that it's even worse though in this montage because they show you. Basically, like what I wrote down was she spent her last days alone while he fought to keep them alive. So she was basically entertaining herself in all of those scenes. He was never present in any of those scenes. So I was like, holy shit, this poor fucking little girl just literally had to spend all this time alone. Like
and it's my understanding that that's the true part of the story. So,
really?
What is it?
Saita?
Not Saita, thank you. Saita, wrote the character of Saita was written by the author as a means of grief. So he wished he had died, but he did not die. He proceeded on because apparently just out of selfish desire for survival, he fed himself first before he fed his daughter or sister rather. And his sister died of malnutrition. And all of that, everything, played out as is, except for him going into the, subway system and dying. So when he says he died that day, that's metaphorically like I wished I had died that day, more or less, or I had died inside that day, because ever since then I've been coping with the fact that I, lost my father in the war in the Navy. That was true. Lost his mother in a air raid. That was true. And lost his sister to malnutrition because he fed himself first out of desire for survival. And, fuck, right? Jesus, fuck.
No, that's crushing.
No, that is the proper note. That is
and that actually reminds me, like, I was just, I don't know if I'm misremembering this or not, but in that opening scene, is there a part where someone leaves him a sandwich and he refuses to eat it?
No, somebody says something like rice, like some kind of rice balls or rice bun of some kind.
Does he eat it or does he not?
He doesn't eat it. No, in fact, when he falls over, either he lands on it or it's already gone. So I don't even know.
So I actually wouldn't be surprised if maybe that was, again, some sort of communication that like maybe once he realized, after she passed and he realized, he allowed himself to die as well as a form of punishment, by refusing to eat.
One of the visual symbolic things that really hit home for me as far as like just the slow painful death of starvation was the fact that the sweetest thing she loved was those little fruit candies, right? But like when those had run out, like that scene where he puts water in the can and to get the last flavors, and she's drinking it from the bowl, and she's like, oh, all the flavors, and it's like that was super sad. Like the fact that like that was as good as it got at this point, was drinking flavored water from a candy jar.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, it was really sweet, and I think that's one of the So one film, actually, I didn't bring this up yet, but one film that I was really reminded of throughout this, especially during that second act, was The Road. I don't know if you guys have seen that one.
No, that's true.
Yeah, and I thought that it was the same thing, where The Road is basically just like, these two people, and specifically the father character, just doing nothing but dealing with trial and tribulation and just persisting for no other reason than to protect, in that film, his son. And, in spite of just constant hardship and all these horrible things that happen, it's that love for his son that ultimately drives him. And it's those little moments in that movie, like where they share the Coke and other things like that, where we see these similar sort of moments. I thought that was sort of part of the entire point of the film, is, again, just that, like, for a lot of people, this is just a depressing situation, and sort of in that movie, the same way that we have the what's her name from Fury Road. Yeah, and she's like, why do I even want to like survive in this world, right? And his character is just like, well, that's just what we have to do, right? I think that same theme is explored here, you know, and it's the filmmaker's intent to show you that, like, yeah, on one hand, you know, maybe just her experiencing the joy of this juice could be looked at as sad, but through another lens, when you have nothing, it's a moment of beauty as well, you know, and that's where the sort of divide lies.
That's the razor's edge of this movie. But I wanted to mention also the other thing it has in common with The Road is they both appear on lists of films that you can only watch once because they're so depressing. But no, I think
this was number 6 on Esquire's most depressing films of all time.
Yeah, it is. Well, and we can certainly close out with some discussion about that, I imagine. But
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what this film is trying to do. Is it's trying to walk that razor's edge. It's trying to kind of show how this little boy is carving some sort of, again, childlike experience out of this, you know, war-torn landscape. So every single opportunity he has, you know, to make it happy, he does. And the same thing is true for Setsuko, even though she's a little girl, you know, like that scene of her playing after she dies twists that fucking knife so hard because it is so many sweet little scenes. And by the way, one of the things that hit me about that montage was like, they really held back most of the joy in the movie for that montage. Like even when the moments that Seita is carving out some joy for them, it's still very, very bittersweet. But that montage specifically is purely sweet in terms of what you're watching. It's bittersweet because of the context, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
So
and I think that's another point that scene tried to make too, which is that, you know, so often, especially in these later stages, you know, especially when someone's sick, it's like, you can spend so much of your time trying to save them that you forget to spend the final moments that you can with them, you know? Yeah. And I think that was also a very resonant point that montage made.
Yeah, a brutal piece of punctuation.
I mean that scene where she's like gripping him, she's like, "Don't leave me alone," you know, just like anything, just whatever, like take me with you, just don't leave me alone. And you know, he did, obviously, out of necessity.
That might have been the line in the movie that hit me the hardest.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
She's just so desperate for him to not leave, you know, and you're just like, fuck her, take her with you, please.
It's like, I hate to tell you, buddy, but this isn't going to work the way you think it is, man. Just take advantage of those last moments while you can, you know?
Seriously.
Just accept. And that's part of it, too, is our inability to accept, you know, situations of loss and grief. And, you know, I mean, there's a fine, again, to your point, these razor edges, there's a fine line between, you know, optimism, you know, hopeful optimism and hopeless optimism, right? Like there becomes a moment where it's like, look, dude, you can fight as much as you want. This is entirely beyond you. There are forces so much stronger than you, and, you know, your entire family, I mean, you know, again, the you know, one or a few people up against forces like death and nature and politics. You know, I think there's an element of learning to accept that so that you don't regret not spending those moments that you had, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, listeners, that is the fun time that is Grave of the Fireflies. But again, you know, for us, you know, we've been looking at a lot of genre films, and there's a reason we put these films on here because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I loved this movie. Like, it was, I mean, I'm one of those people who, first of all, I enjoy emotional experiences, right? And I'm actually, like, cards on the table, like, I'm not always so great with emotions in real life. Go figure, right? And we can go into a bunch of reasons for that, and we're not going to. But my point is, I've long held that one of the reasons that I personally love film to the degree that I do is it's a sort of a shameless and open forum for you to experience emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, like, it could be the case that if someone if there's a loss in your family, for example, right, you might have to be the guy that has to be strong, right? Or the girl, you know, whoever you are. Like, you might be the person in your family that has to stand up and be strong for everyone else. Mm-hmm. And you don't get the opportunity to grieve. You know, you have to be that show of support. And, you know, so often I think that we can find ourselves being in that place and doing things like watching films where it's like, okay, this is 2 hours. It's me and the screen. I can have these emotions. I can let myself feel. And when it's over, like, I can just go right back to being strong and being the person that I need to be. for everyone in my life. So I know that's, kind of where I come from with a lot of these films, and that's why it's always like a really rewarding experience to watch the emotional films, just as right alongside, the great action films and shitty genre films and horror films that we all know and love,
Mm-hmm. This movie, if anything, like that's a way I would describe this movie. It is, it's not pleasant, but it is cathartic to like have that emotional release on a real raw level. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't spoon feed you like, oh, you should feel this way. It's just like, this is life in all of its fucked up complexity in the the case of a war zone in this case. But I mean, that's I agree with you. The reason film is so powerful is it does let you have the ability to relate on a real emotional level with the character's struggle, and in this case, loss.
Yeah. Well, I think the complexity is kind of what makes it tick, because if it was really, I think, trying to make you feel only this thing about this relationship and this little girl, it wouldn't. I don't know if it would work. I think the fact that it is showing all these social layers and kind of, that it is the backdrop of the war, or the war is a backdrop to this story more specifically. I think by having all those elements and the survival element, you really get a lot more out of this relationship, Like, I don't know if you'd be able to make a story this dire without all of the elements, because it is a little tough to follow, in the sense that you're just like, oh my God, how much longer is this fucking movie? I want to die right now so bad. And in fact, I mean, I've reopened the sutures that I actually just put in my wrist from last night. Just from talking about this, I've had to return to my original plan of taking my own life because this movie's so fucking sad.
I don't think that was the
I shouldn't make
director's
suicide
intent.
jokes. That's a terrible fucking thing to do.
But I will say without question, there's no more depressing animated film I've ever seen. I mean,
No.
Well, I was going to add that is that this is very regional in the sense that I was really racking my brain as I was watching this to try to think of an equivalent or a parallel animated experience I've had in American cinema. I know that we've mentioned a lot of live action.
Yeah.
But one thing the director had said is that he wanted it to be animated so that it's more about the circumstance and you could put yourself in these situations, because if you're watching live action, then it's less personal, I guess, and your imagination isn't connected to the experience. You're more just watching a person, like it's their problem. You know what I mean? Like we're watching this actor go through this thing, playing this person. But he felt that it was easier to kind of put yourself into these situations if it was animated, a little more surreal, if you will. But as far as American cinema goes, we'll use those moments, whether it be the Mother of Mine situation in a song from Dumbo to Bambi, or the first 10 minutes of Up. But to just make the whole film the backdrop of war and tragedy and all of that, I was kind of coming up short. Do you guys know of any American animated experiences that would compare?
No.
Yeah, I've never emotionally, I've never had this sort of cause and effect watching an animated film. Which is why I think
same.
it's so successful and still is considered so esteemed and regarded, because that's hard enough to pull off in a live action narrative, but to have that much like just deep resonance on a very painful level through a movie that looks cute, it's but it's the subject itself is horrifying.
I feel like American animation will use the subject matter like this as a catalyst for your characters.
Sure.
Like I said, like the opening of your film, Disney's famous for it. The mother dies. Okay, great. Now you've got the kid on their own and they've got to go figure out how to do this thing. And they go through the changes. Ta-da. At the end, they get the prince or whatever it is.
Right.
And they get to live happily ever after. But this isn't a happily ever after scenario from an animated story. I don't know.
Look, American animation is first and foremost about making money. For most of it,
and
especially when you're talking about Disney, right? So, Japan couldn't even get this film financed without selling it with My Neighbor Totoro. So there's no chance it's going to get financed.
Yeah, and people actually read manga in Japan. Like, people love this style of art in Japan, and they still can't get this financed. I did think of an American movie, though. I did think of one.
Go for it.
Watership Down. Fucking destroyed me when I was a little kid.
I've never seen that one, dude, but I've heard it's devastating.
It is
so devastating.
Too,
yeah, so devastating. I still haven't rewatched it since I was like 7. You know what I mean? But I keep wanting to. So I agree with you though, and I think that I'm fascinated by the element of the sophistication of Japanese audiences, and I so always wish that American audiences were that sophisticated. And by the way, I do think that they easily could be. It's just about what they're being given.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, the American audiences are out there. It's just in smaller kind of doses. You know what I mean? Like,
because
it's not the mainstream.
Popular entertainment is not this sophisticated or this
exactly.
complex or, interesting. So I think it's about shifting what's popular in this country, because clearly there is an appetite, I think, when you really get down to brass tacks and talk to people in this country. So what do you guys think of the fact that this has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes?
I'm surprised, but also not. I mean, I think it deserves every bit of it. Like, I think it's a great movie. And actually, I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and let's formally wrap this up here. So one of the things that we do, and Ryan, I'm gonna go ahead and start you off here just so you can set the tone here. So we always wrap up a film by doing two things. We ascribe 3 adjectives that we think describe our response to the film, give a little bit of backstory behind it, or not. You can just throw them out there if you want. And then you can go ahead and you can either give it a grade rating a la Ryan Siebold, or you can give it a star rating out of 5 a la Jason Peters. I'll explain why we do that in a moment. So, Ryan, kick off our 3 adjectives. What you got, buddy?
My first one is gut punch, a little hyphenated adjective. This is honestly, I was kind of going back.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, you can get super creative with these. Sometimes they're actually 2 words. It's
I think we've used whole sentences before.
There's a lot of leeway here. We're not straight.
Right. If it's 2 gut punch, it's a verb. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this movie is a gut. Yeah, it's a gut punch. I think it's our first gut punch movie that we've done. I was going through this.
Really?
I know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I don't think we've covered one yet.
So you just earned the esoteric label, is what you're saying? Just this episode.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, unless you count the ending of Zardoz as like heartbreaking.
You
when Sean
shut up,
Connery
Ryan. I told you to shut the fuck up on Zardoz.
Yeah. So gut punch. My second adjective is gorgeous, because you can't not talk about the art of this film. It's just a captivating, good to look at, gorgeous movie. The just the angles that they show you, in the sense of like, it's very cinematic, even though the animation style can be very simple at times. You take for granted that we have Pixar now, and I mean, this was being developed before Lion King or Little Mermaid. I mean, you think of where animation was back then, and what they had to go off of and what they were building on. I would think that probably some of the more beautiful pieces would be like Secret of NIMH, or some of the stuff Don Bluth was doing. Disney was in the shithole at this time. So, I know that, there is Asian cinema that does exist prior to this animated cinema, but to me, this was my first real kind of reckoning from '88. I know this is the same year I think Akira came out as well, if I'm not mistaken, which is also a gorgeous film. I have seen that. Yeah. So gorgeous. And then the last one is Patient. I think the pacing of this film is just flawless, and that's what really gets the rating up for me, is just how it lets you sit in these moments. Nothing is said until it needs to be. It doesn't show you the action. It shows you how people respond to the action. The emphasis is put on just the right thing at all times. And I think that the film doesn't talk down to its viewer. It really, expects us to live up to the film, and not the film talking down to us. And I think that it was, the breaths in between these moments were very patient. And
Definitely.
When you
Wonderful.
said this movie was gorgeous, I could only think of your character from our Army of the Dead episode, and you said gorgeous. This movie's horny.
It's horny. Yes.
It's a gorgeous film. Gorgeous.
There's nothing arousing
exactly what
about this movie.
No, I was going to say it's exactly what the movie's not. There's nothing horny.
In fact, I actually also have in my notes that we all together now have gone from the Army of the Dead to just the Dead.
Yeah.
So, we've taken the full gambit.
Yeah. Once again, especially because this movie makes you want to kill yourself.
Yeah, also true. Yeah.
Seamus, what you got, buddy?
I would say, if I was going to pick 3 adjectives, I would say genuine, somber, and heartfelt.
Nice. Definitely. Yeah, not gonna contradict any of that. How about you, Kraig?
Well, I almost went with compassionate, but after our discussion, I realized that there is such a focus on the lack of compassion of the people around the kids. I do think there's a compassion to the filmmaking. The actual storyteller was very interested and compassionate towards the main characters. But I think ultimately that's actually sensitive would be the adjective that I would use for that. The second one is lyrical, which may play into the sensitivity, but I think that there is an element of magic in a lot of the small moments, and that was something I think they were really trying for. Obviously, as we talked about the gut punch, Ryan, thank you, the gut punch montage of her playing, that's very much, all the lyricism you can possibly imagine pack into scenes, So, and then finally, Hopeless, because it is, the other movie I kept thinking of was Into the Wild with Emil Hirsch, which is one of the most maddening fucking movies I've ever seen, because he's doomed. He dooms himself, and you can just feel the doom coming. And I think that is sort of how this movie goes too, is like you just know. And I mean, I'd seen this 20 years ago or something. I broke the rule of the list of movies you should only watch once because they're so sad, and I watched it twice, you guys. And it is nice. It is dire as fuck. Like you just know it's not going anywhere good, especially because the main character's dead at the beginning and he's alone. So it's like there's no spoilers happening. The little girl's not going to make it. So I don't know. It's a very interesting experience in that.
Perfect selection for a children's birthday party. So any parents out there listening, pick this up. You got a bunch of kids coming over for some pizza and cake. Throw this on. They'll love it.
You can put it on with no sound, no big deal. Like they don't need the subtitles. Still just a perfectly happy experience.
100%. So, all right. And then for my three, I've got subtle. I really like the way that the film just didn't beat you over the head like we talked about over the course of our discussion. Even just a lot of the things that we discussed here, I didn't really observe beforehand. So, and that's always the cool thing about having these discussions. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of these that you'll realize. I thought it was a genuine film. It wore its heart on its sleeve. It let you know what it was. It wasn't cynical. It actually tried to find, these brief moments of happiness and positivity in just the most dire set of circumstances. And then obviously an emotional film. It's something that definitely... it slow builds in terms of just the weight that it sort of stacks on your shoulders, and then it just kind of, go ahead and cracks your back at the very end and lets all of the ugly emotions spill out. But every now and then, I think that's a good thing for us to have. Like I said, not everything needs to be dick jokes and crazy monsters from beyond. It's good to have these really thoughtful, thought-provoking, heartfelt films. So. Really enjoyed this one. We're going to go ahead and we're going to slap a formal rating on it. Like I said, you can give a grade rating, F through A+, or you can give a star rating out of 5. Seamus, let's start with you. What you got?
I'll go with the school grade ratings, and I'll give this a solid A.
Nice.
That's my man, Seamus. Keep it with the letter grade.
Man. Kraig, what you got, man?
Well, I'll be irreverent, and I'll go with a star rating.
Hey!
I'm going to go, this is going to go, well, it's always got to be opposing teams with us, Ryan. That's just the rules. It's in my writer. The thing is, I don't know why I have to do this, but I have to give this a 4.5, not a 5-star rating. And I don't know exactly why that is. I just felt like maybe, even though it is extraordinarily patient, sometimes I didn't feel extraordinarily patient with this movie. It just felt a tad slow, and I understand that maybe it is because all the action was purposefully off screen, and this was about reacting to the action, as you just said, Ryan. But yeah, I still think it's just a little bit slow, and it's very downtrodden. So it is, I think it's appropriate that it's on lists of movies so depressing you can only watch them once. And that, to me, I don't know, that element of only being able to watch it once or twice in 20 years, it does knock just a tiny bit of the shine off of it, but it's still an excellent movie.
Definitely. Yeah. So I'll actually piggyback off of that, because I'll say that, so I don't know about, obviously you just let us know, I often find that movies that people say that you can only watch once, I really don't have a problem with them, and I think that, so a movie like Salo, where you can only watch it once because, they feed kids their own shit, I don't need to see that. That's a snuff film and a scatological, I once was plenty, right? That's the sort of litmus test for, shocking cinema, right? But I have seen Requiem for a Dream a dozen times, at least.
Yep.
Right.
That was the example I was going to say. Like a movie that most people tell me, like, I only could get through that once. I've watched it like 25
Yeah,
times.
no, it's
I think we
brilliant.
need to leave these two alone to talk about. And
And I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's just because I have like something of like a depressing outlook. Like, I mean, whose life is just all sunshine and rainbows out there,
sure,
dude?
I get
Like,
that, but
life is rough. Life is dealing with, sadness and depression and disappointment and ups
do you
and downs. And like, so,
What about The Machinist?
on one hand, you have
Machinist?
The Machinist. I honestly didn't have an emotional response to.
But I mean, did you watch that multiple times?
No, but not because it was unpleasant. It was because it was a mediocre film that I didn't really respond to emotionally.
Agree.
I did respond to it emotionally in horror.
Oh yeah. But yeah, no. So like the thing, honestly, the things I have a hard time watching, and Ryan, we talk about this all the time, is like the torture porn shit. You know what I mean? So anytime, and specifically, it's the trifecta of nails, teeth, and eyes. Like anytime, like the terrorists are using pliers to pull out nails, like I'm out. Same thing with the teeth. When they got needles by the eyes, I'm out. It's too visceral. I feel that shit. I can't do it. And then, like I said, feeding a bunch of school children their own feces, I'm out. That's a one and doneer.
That's a good line to have, though. I think. I don't.
But no. So quote unquote depressing films. I mean, it's just it's the spectrum of emotion that we deal with in life.
100%. I mean, and I'm being slightly glib when I'm saying you can never watch it again, but it is a movie so heavy that it's not something I would choose to watch for fun anytime in the near future, having now watched it for the second time in my life,
Yeah.
Well, and again, like I started out earlier saying, this is kind of a movie that you watch by yourself.
Yeah.
It's an experience. It's like a personal experience that it takes you someplace. But it's nothing I would want to share with anybody, really.
Yeah.
I would have to be pretty comfortable with you.
No, yeah.
If you're out there and we're dating and I put on Grave of the Fireflies, you got me locked down.
or you've just or it's just like a targeted play where you're like, oh, this chick digs emotion. I'm gonna let it all out here. She's gonna cradle me afterwards.
She thinks I'm all dick jokes. Wait till she sees Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
he's so soft. He's deep.
Yep.
He's like, speaking of deep, baby, let's get at it. I'll go ahead
he went for an
and
hour and a half. I gotta leave. He's too sensitive.
I'll go ahead and formalize mine, which is I actually had the same thing you did, Craig. I'm gonna give it 4 3/4 stars, just shy of that 5. And it's kind of one of those things where I can't articulate it. Like when I think about it, I think that's the thing. One of the things that I've noticed, the aspects of Japanese cinema, and I think that this relates to culture, is that generally speaking, the Japanese people are much more reserved in their emotions, right? Whereas Americans, we're loud and we're broad and like it's, we're hard on our sleeve sorts for a lot of us. And when we do have emotions, they're very loud. That's why, most of the climaxes are like screaming in the middle of the rain, right? Whereas Kurosawa's just like, okay, let's just go ahead and wrap this up nice, tidy, get out, right? So I do think that part of it is that as an American, go figure, I have been conditioned to sort of appreciate more emotional experiences. And, which sounds funny coming from someone who their favorite filmmaker is Kubrick, right? Who's like the least emotional filmmaker that you could have out there.
That's arguable, man.
Arguably, yes, I know. That's his reputation. I agree with you.
There's
actually,
quite a bit of emotion packed into all of his movies.
I do
as far
agree
as
with
I'm
you on that, but
concerned,
a lot of people would disagree with that.
By the way, I just want to point out what shirt I'm
Hey-o,
wearing as you make that reference. Yeah, I'm wearing my HAL 9000.
Yeah, so, but it's just, again, it's one of those films where, it almost does require that talking about it afterwards to really pick up on everything, like all of the stuff that we brought up here. I didn't necessarily come away with that from the film, so, and that's not necessarily, I suppose, any fault of the film, but it's just like, it came up just shy of that, like, oh yeah, let me put this in like my pantheon of like my personal favorite films of all time, right? Which is why I can give this 4 3/4 stars and give Dead Alive 5 stars. Is Dead Alive a better film? No, but I prefer it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be okay. I have to backtrack and just be honest. For me, the lack of a half star is because there's no tentacle porn in this movie, and that's really what I expect out of anime.
I was expecting hentai of the Fireflies over here.
Hentai of the Fireflies.
That's my new band name, by the way.
Well, see that would be more like the Requiem for a Dream version.
For sure.
You know, it's dual-ended dildos and
exactly. Refrigerators coming to life and shit.
No, but I mean, like in terms of other anime, for instance, I would give Princess Mononoke 5 stars instead because it has the element of action and fantasy that I need, but there's also, I think it's more the mystical side of that movie that adds a power. Like this movie has the power of sadness in the sense that you're like, oh my God, this is powerfully emotional. But I think for me, Princess Mononoke makes a little bit more of a statement. It's an environmental allegory and kind of has, the characters take a stand toward that in the end of the film. And so I think there's something about that that's just, it's uplifting, by comparison to this. So right there out of the gate, you're giving me a reason to probably rewatch it and enjoy it a little bit more. But I also think...
And that you bring up an interesting point, Craig, because I think that's exactly... So I gave this film an A for A-Team, which you're no longer a part of, dickhead.
Wow.
Call back.
So
see what happens when you star rate something and get kicked off the A-Team.
Yeah. No, you left the A-Team for Team Jason.
This
we
plan
see how
is
it goes.
definitely not coming together.
We may not have the clever name, but we execute much stronger than the A-Team over there. We're the platinum team. We're the A+ team. Okay.
The J team. To your
the
credit,
JK
Craig,
team.
The K team. Yeah. Wait, that means we're kidding though. I don't know about that.
To your credit, Craig, I was just going to say that this film is a little, I gave it an A and not an A+, only because it was a little one note. I think there are films that can take me places like this, but also take me other places as well, emotionally. And what this did well, it did better than almost anything I've ever seen. But I think that maybe, there are other films that can do that and something else and add other elements to it. Not that I need a happy ending. In fact, quite the contrary. I love an unhappy ending.
Unless we're talking about massage.
Right, exactly. I am from Florida again. We are the land of the happy endings.
Why is your camera shaking? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the gator got out of its cage.
Yeah.
I don't need any more details on that. I just want to use my imagination.
Oh no, it got the problem on them.
Wow, that was a little like Nolan's Bill Crosby right there. Hey, it's
Jello pudding packs.
Right. So yeah,
actually, that's the exact same reason I would say I gave it an A instead of an A+, because like it was unlike any other animated film I've seen, but also I mean to get that plus, you kind of do want the fantastical element on top of it, or you want the science fiction element on top of it. This was just more like watching a war documentary sort of like, but with like, Japanese animated kids.
And that doesn't, like, we're all apologizing for not giving it 100%, but let's all, take stock.
We were very kind to this film.
We gave it, I mean, credit where due. This film's badass.
It's
and
absolutely one of the best animated films of all time in terms of
all time,
this type of film. That's like no question.
I mean, I think it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes because nobody has the balls to actually equivocate in any way over it. Like they're not going to be the pacing or the maybe it's a little pro Japan. Like I've seen some reviews online that are not part of Rotten Tomatoes that will go a little deeper. But the Rotten Tomatoes reviews and all the IMDb reviews are a 10, like a tippy top. I have no complaints. What a fucking experience, and I can completely give it up to this movie to be that for most people,
Yeah.
We're just picky as fuck.
Little pretentious.
Discerning is how you, we're not picky. We're discerning.
Right.
Yeah. All right, guys. So, that is our review of Grave of the Fireflies with the fine folks over at the Repeat Viewing Podcast. So, Kraig and Seamus, before I go ahead and wrap things up and do our plugs and next film and everything, why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about your show, where they can find you, websites, all that good stuff.
All right. Well, you can find us at Repeat View Pod on all the platforms for the podcast. Our podcast is very much like this one in that we typically review library films, although lately with all the new releases to streaming platforms, we've kind of jumped on that bandwagon a little bit. But But yeah, you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, and I think we've got a pretty good variety of episodes, over 100 episodes now for people to choose from. So please find us wherever you download, listen, and subscribe, and do so. And then, of course, recommend us to your friends if you like our show. And you can find me at Kraig Comics on all the platforms. That's KraigComx. What about you, Seamus?
You can find me online, separate of the show, at Seamus Smith Art. That is spelled SEAMUS Smith Art.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. And then for the listeners, if you go over there and you find the Army of the Dead episode, you might see Esoterica Cinema there. Again, that was the one we looked at. If you missed that at the top of the show, had a lot of fun. Much more joke heavy than this one. You know, obviously this one gave us a chance to be a little bit more somber, which is good because, again, you know, we like to go all over the place and just, you know, speaking to what I was talking about at the end of the show, where, you know, cinema is this sort of rich tapestry of emotion, and, you know, sometimes you want, you know, the dick and fart jokes, and sometimes you want some, you know, heavy-handed emotion and everything in between. So we definitely try to represent that on our master list of films that we're going to pull from here in just a moment. I do want to remind everybody that we actually do have the website up and running, so you can go to esotericacinema.com, and we've got the Flippers video. I don't believe we've actually announced that yet, so you're gonna see that Flippers animatic on there, which guys, so I don't know if you're familiar, we did a sketch in season 1 called Flippers. That was for a fake commercial for a strip club that was owned by the sea captain, Willem Dafoe's character from The Lighthouse.
I did not.
And that was actually, Ryan was in full performance on that one, and basically did the Hark speech.
You did the weird Maine accent that they use in that movie?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Selling, the girls and the buffet and everything. So,
mermaid. Good old mermaid fucking.
Good old mermaid puss.
Mermaid puss.
Yes, if you recognize the several references to mermaid puss over the course of our entire 2 seasons of Esoterica Cinema, that's what that refers to.
Look,
so,
I get it. I mean, I don't think I'm going to let zombie tits die anytime soon. So
they are undead. They are the tits of the undead.
Technically, they're already dead. So you know.
Yeah. So and then not content to leave well enough alone, Ryan decided that he was going to have an animatic actually made to this sketch. So on the website right there, it's a longer. I think it's like 2-3 minute sketch. This one.
Awesome.
Yeah. So there's a whole animatic there. It's brilliant. It's very funny. Listeners, if you haven't seen that yet, go ahead and check that out. We should have that up on a lot of our other platforms as well. Just to remind you, again, we are on the Twitter and the Instagram at Esoterica Cinema. I personally am on both as well at Jason Aberrant. That's ABERRANT. And Ryan is at the Ryan Siebold on Twitter, and I think what are you on Instagram? You're not the Ryan Siebold, right?
No, I'm Ryan _Siebold.
Ryan _ Siebold on Instagram. Yeah. But yeah.
I never planned on having a podcast and multiple handles. It was never going to affect me, but now tons of regret. Nothing but regret.
Absolutely. So guys, I don't know if we actually told you this, but like about how the way we select our films, I think we might have told you when we guested on your show. To where we do just like a random pull at the end of every episode. Again, we have this master list of 200 films available that you, the listeners, can go on and download right now and play along. We are watching, so the way the seasons work, we end up watching, I believe it's 30 films a season, which is 15% of this list. So for next season, we're going to need to replenish that with 30 more films. So for anybody listening, feel free to reach out to us at any of the platforms there, or also, if you prefer email, you can reach out to us, esotericacinema@gmail.com. The first person to reach out and suggest a film for season 3, 100% it goes on the list. No questions asked, whatever it is. From there, we'll see. So reach out to us. Let us know what you want to see on that list. And then you can excitedly play along and see if we're going to end up pulling it or not. Now, normally,
Jason, this just in. I just got our first recommendation. It is Anal Juice 6. Anal Juice 6.
Wait, is that the movie?
Maybe it's the Zoom.
Or is that
Did you say anal Jew? Because
Jew.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Anal
wow,
Jews
yeah.
6 or
Yeah.
Juice
Yeah, I got a
6?
Let's clarify.
I'll be editing this out right away, guys.
You better fucking keep that. That's funny.
Oh, dude, no, he edits out everything. I talk shit about Ron Howard, he edits it out.
No. We're gonna have to talk about editing, Ryan.
I will say
Constantly
in
trying
regards
to protect
to
me from myself.
Lots of space lasers in this one. I don't know what that's about. Yeah, looks science fiction based.
Well, it's Mel
well,
Brooks
well, a
inspired.
recommendation that I was going to give off the top of my head for your next season, just like largely inspired by your T-shirt, Jason, is "Shakes the Clap." So
yes, the Bill Murray
I would
classic.
throw that in the hopper.
Yes,
Appreciate that.
definitely. So here's what I actually want to do for this one. So normally I would do we go to we were using Google, and then we went back to our old trusted random.org true random number generator. I'm gonna let you guys do it this time, okay? But instead of having one or two of you go, I'm gonna take both of you are gonna give me a number between 1 and 200. Okay, so Kraig, you go first. Number between 1 and 200.
76.
Okay.
101.
Okay, so that's going to give us 177. We're going to divide that bitch by 2. That's going to give us 88.5, which we round up to 89. So for the purposes of this show, they have just selected number 89, which I feel like was super close to one we already did, but it's hard to say. So either way, we're going to go to our master list. Going to come down here to 89. I haven't seen this one in so long, dude, and it's one of my favorite filmmakers. A little one by Joe Dante called Matinee.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Is that considered? I mean, is that a genre film, or where does that? It's kind of all the genres.
It's a movie about movies, so
yeah,
it fits in
either
with
way,
like the player and the big picture and stuff more than
A goodie from John Goodman.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I haven't seen that one in forever, possibly since it came out in theater. And I love Joe Dante. I'm a huge fan of both Gremlins films.
Have you heard his podcast?
I love his segment in the Twilight Zone.
Have you heard his podcast?
I have not. No.
I forget what the name of it is off the top of my head. Hold on, I can tell you. But it's basically Joe Dante and another filmmaker talking to filmmakers, so they get literally everybody you can possibly imagine.
Oh wow, you'd think that would be something that would be on my radar by now.
It's called The Movies That Made Me.
Oh, I have heard that one.
Yeah.
That's totally one of those things that's been on my list. That's just too much damn time making these podcasts for the listeners. I hope you're happy, listeners. You're stealing me from Joe Dante podcasts, but I'm happy to do it.
I said some screenwriter. It's actually Josh Olson, who's an Oscar-nominated screenwriter.
Yeah, just that guy. No big deal. That punts.
No big. Whatever. He thinks he's so special. An Oscar nomination.
Yeah.
He should also not be fed after midnight.
Yes, that's true.
Awesome. So I'm actually looking forward to that one. That one's a comedy, which I don't think we've done a comedy yet. Well, Dead Alive kind of, I guess, was a comedy. So. But yeah, again,
Tucker and Dale tried to be a comedy.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, that's true.
Hold on
we
a
did
second.
not like Tucker and Dale,
fuck?
bro. We did not. I was so upset.
Wow,
Someone's
I
gonna
thought
have to
our
listen to
podcast
season
could
2.
be friends.
Oh no, I was so I was like the most disappointed in a movie I've been in so long by that film. Like
You're
I was
crazy.
so ready to enjoy that film.
You're nuts.
And the crushing disappointment that followed.
Can't disagree more.
Oh man, well we're gonna have to fight about
Yeah, I
this.
mean, we
offline.
covered that one on our show, and we both love that.
Yeah, no, that one just dropped a couple episodes actually.
Too bad. I've seen that movie like 3 or 4 times, dude. I love that movie. It's funny.
No, I will never watch that movie again.
We'll have to have you on for a
that's right.
bonus episode at some point to discuss why you like that movie.
Yeah, you know what? We'll
I
have
would be
to.
happy to tell you.
Well, now
I'm
we're
going to
doing these
listen to that
bonus
episode,
episodes.
and then I'll debate you off camera. I'll call you up.
Well, and
we'll have our own
bonus
Zoom.
episodes we're doing too now. These little sort of like variety episode things that we're starting to introduce. We have another one coming up next week, actually. Yeah, because this for that'll be our second. So we'll have to maybe introduce some sort of like, fisticuffs feature or
That would be great. Yeah.
Esoterica Cinema versus repeat viewing, like
Podcast
3
battle.
rounds.
Yeah.
Yep.
Make some sort of feature after that. So we'll definitely be in touch about that because that'd be a lot of fun.
And then we'll just edit you out, and then we'll berate you the entire time. It'll
all
be
your best
fantastic.
points we'll edit out to make us look far superior.
Oh, I assume that was what was going to happen to this episode. So
Awesome.
This episode will be 30 minutes.
Well, hey guys, this was a ton of fun. Again, listeners, repeat viewing podcast. Go ahead and check them out. Kraig, Seamus, really appreciate having you guys on. This will definitely not be the last time if we have anything to say about that.
it's our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
100%. So, listeners, make sure to watch the Joe Dante classic. Can we say classic? Either way, the Joe Dante film Matinee with John Goodman, and we will see you next week on Esoterica Cinema.
And in the meantime, Ryan, shut the fuck up about Zardoz.
In 1988, Studio Ghibli touched the hearts and minds of people everywhere with its devastatingly haunting debut, Grave of the Fireflies. Today, Platinum Dunes is proud, I'm told, to present the reimagining of a beloved classic as we introduce you to the hyper-aggressive world of Michael Bay's Grave of the Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies! Hello, this is Michael Bay, and I've always really enjoyed Grave of the Fireflies, just not the sad parts. So I figured, what if we took this Setsuko girl and just made her the ultimate badass? Like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, but with a pretty big purse. But of course, Michael being Michael, no actress could possibly live up to his high standards. Actors, certainly. Actresses, not so much. So he leaned on the one person he always does in such situations, himself. I mean, these little girls did fine, but they didn't capture the heights of what I was looking for. I wanted rising cream, but all I got was stale yeast. You know what I'm saying? No one, in fact, knew what he was saying. So I decided the only person who would really be able to catch the essence of Setsuko would be me. The man, Michael Bay. Michael trained for several months to capture the essence of a 5-year-old Japanese girl suffering from dysentery. I was on a rigorous regimen of push-ups, sit-ups, and burpees. And then, to truly understand the dysentery, I would finish every meal with an entire bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. Michael's marriage to his third wife would not survive the training. I think I nailed the performance, but you're gonna have to see for yourself live on Friday night when I bring some cold hard WWII era pain to those who would oppress my fellow countrymen. So, I suppose be certain to keep your eyes out for, yes, really, Grave of the Fireflies as reimagined by one Mr. Michael Bay. Yes, Michael Bay. Coming soon, oh yeah!
From the visionary minds at Aberrant Literature comes a short fiction collection unlike any other, Aberrant Tales. Bursting at the seams with stories of creativity, excitement and wonder, Aberrant Tales takes the very best in modern science fiction, fantasy and horror and weaves them into one thrilling eclectic package. Featuring the works of Ashton Macaulay, M.T. Roberts, Daniel Kurland and Jason Peters, Aberrant Tales is available today in ebook, hardcover and paperback versions, online and everywhere books are sold. Published by Aberrant Literature.